of 2021 and also for the most part of 2022. As we speak to you today, that entire process resulted in Cabinet approving what we now refer to as a national framework towards professionalization of the public sector. We're no longer focusing just on the public service, but we are now broadly inclusive in focusing on the public sector. This was approved by Cabinet in October 2022. About 6 months later now, we are in May 2023, and our main worry now is no longer consultations. We are no longer worried about talk. As you know, we are renowned as South Africans for being the masters of talk. We are no longer concerned about that. We are now concerned about doing, implementation, execution. Whatever words you choose to use to define this period that we are in, as long as it results in people going out, acting out in specific ways and effecting change in very direct ways, then you are in the doing space, you are in the execution space, you are in the implementation space. So we are doing the talk this morning, unfortunately, because many of you might have underestimated the importance of this endeavor. Many of you might have previously chosen not to apply your minds on this matter. Many of you might be waking up today and being asked to include certain deliverables in your performance agreements, in your personal development plans, even in relation to issues of consequence management. Many of you might be waking up today and being told about consequence management as per the professionalization framework. So we thought, as a National School of Government, and my colleague, Ms. Faith Nyaka, as the director was just indicating, will give us more details. We thought that let's be a bit patient. Let's allow more talk. You know, it is what it is. It is South Africa, by the way. So people want more talk. We thought, no, let's give them one more talk. Maybe from tomorrow, they will start the doing, they will start the execution, they will start the implementation. We hope, colleagues, that we're not going to have any more talks about this. In fact, I was saying to my colleague, Faith, when we were arranging this, that I'm actually tired of talking about this thing. I think we have spoken enough about this thing. People must now start doing the things they need to do. Supply chain management is a very critical area in the work that we do. And I understand that many of you who are here today are in the field of supply chain management. When we were busy drafting the framework and when we were proposing in terms of personal development, in terms of career progression, in terms of consequence management, we proposed that we are going to require, and this has now been approved by Cabinet, we are going to require all public servants to belong to professional bodies. The reason we said this was to achieve two things. One, we believed as we were developing this framework that if public servants in South Africa, the entirety of the public sector as per the approved framework, was to ensure that all of us who are in the public sector belong to a professional body. It will then assist in us being developed, being capacitated, being further educated, being on the cutting edge of knowledge and development in our fields. This thing of public servants who went to school in 1940 and they think they can do public sector stuff in 2023. We want to do away with it. We want people who are public sector employees in 2023 to have the knowledge of 2023. Because you see, some of us who received our degrees in 1940, there was no computer in 1940. So if your degree is still a 1940 degree and you are still working in the public sector in 2023, we have a problem. So that is why we said, no, let's have a professional body and then put in place mechanisms and systems and processes that must force public servants to belong to a professional body so that this professional body can then say, guys, you have to come back for this retraining, you have to come back for this refresher, you have to come back for this upgrading, and you have to accumulate these kinds of professional development points, which then have implications for your continued employment. Because you see, if you don't do these things that the professional body says you must do, one day you'll come back to work and your employer will say, what are you doing here? We don't expect to see you because we checked your professional development points and we saw that you are short. So technically you are no longer employed with us. So that was the one part. The second part, we said we needed to introduce a third layer on consequence management. This thing that all of us in the public sector today, consequence management is only between the employer and the employee, is not sustainable. We have realized through the worst that has happened in the public sector that there is a lot of sweetheart employer-employee relations that don't assist us in managing consequences when people misbehave. So we said, okay, let's have these professional bodies so that they can help us deal with consequence management, and they introduce this third layer on the issue of consequence management. Because you see then, if the employer and the employee have a sweetheart relationship and they fail to manage consequences, but the professional body disbars or stops you from continuing to be a member, whereas your employment contract requires of you to be a member, then you automatically then have a problem in that employer-employee relationship. I just want to conclude in welcoming you to say that all these things that I've said have huge and serious implications for supply chain management, because with regards to supply chain management, as we were finalizing these issues of consequence management and professional bodies, the Commission on State Capture that was chaired by Justice Zondo made a specific recommendation with regards to supply chain management in the public sector. And that recommendation requires of us to professionalize supply chain management. There is a specific recommendation that arises out of the Zondo Commission that requires of us in the public sector to professionalize supply chain. So unlike all other sectors that can dilly-dally and say we'll do it next year, supply chain is already in the Zondo Commission, is already a recommendation from the Zondo Commission. It is something that we have to do and prioritize urgently. So I hope as we do this talk today, hopefully for the last time, we realize that supply chain management is a special and significant area that we have to move very fast to professionalize. Today, we've been gray listed as South Africa. And if you look at the issues around why we've been gray listed, they're around finance, but also more specifically around supply chain management. So I hope, colleagues, the talk will not just be the talk, but it will be an attempt to understand all these aspects with the aim of execution, implementation, doing, so that we go beyond just talking. Thank you very much, Chair, and I hope we have a wonderful conversation this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Maja. Indeed, your advice and warning against talk for the sake of talking is well heeded. Hence, in the case of this, the stage at which we are, it's about consultation in as far as how do we implement, what role do we play as National Treasury, as auditors, as well as the PME. So we definitely have heeded that call that we should now talk about the role we play as far as professionalization is concerned. Also, members of the public, as well as officials, please note that you can also participate. Hence, we're saying it's not just a one-way talk. Participate by stating your comments as well as your questions, which we will address them at a later stage in our program. And you have only a Q&A section to place them there. We have disabled the chat, but Q&A is for you to put your comments as well as your questions and inputs for this process on professionalization. So thanks a lot. Now that we know where the framework comes from, that it was initiated by the National School of Governance under the leadership of the Minister of Public Service and Administration, with participation of various stakeholders, we are now at the point where we are advocating for its implementation. And the important thing is that the role players that are speaking in all the consultation we're having, they're basically telling us how will they do it, whether it will need new regulations, like Treasury regulations or public service regulations, whether it would need ministerial directives, whether the way they're written in the framework are enough for implementation. All of this could be clearer as we go along, hence these kind of talks. And indeed, shouldn't be talk just for the sake of talk. May I now introduce you to Ms. Faith Nyaga. Ms. Faith Nyaga is a Chief Director in the National School of Government. She's a Chief Director for Quality Assurance, and she has also been part of the people who drove this process of professionalization framework. Over to you, Ms. Nyaga.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Chair. I'm going to briefly share with you the national framework towards the professionalization of the public sector. And we are doing this webinar in collaboration with the National Treasury, who invited us to do the presentation in this meeting. My first slide will focus on the purpose why the framework was designed, and Dr. Maja tried to touch on some of the issues. But the most critical part is that we want to institutionalize the public sector as a career of choice. I think there's a lot of talks that, public service is full of people who are lazy. We want to clear and correct that perception that it is not true. Not everyone can join the public sector as we move forward. We need people who are going to be committed, who are ethical, and also who are competent in doing their work. And we want to establish a career based on meritocracy and ethical disposition, especially, as I've indicated, meritocracy speaks to a person who's qualified for the position, who's got the relevant competencies and skills to perform the job. And also the issues of ethics is very critical at this stage, especially from what we saw happening in the Zondo Commission. And you will see that the framework is trying to put some measures to curb issues of unethical disposition in the public sector. And we also want to create a clear vision as to where the next generation of public servants are going to come from. As you can see, the aging cohort in technical skills are leaving the system. So we need to create a way on how we are going to ensure that there are competent and relevant people within the system as the aging cohort is leaving. And we also want to make sure that we determine how we are going to professionalize people. We're going to get professional people with skills and also technical skills within the system. The last part, you need to see this framework as part of a state reform, which wants to strengthen state capacity. In terms of the objectives come from the problem statement. And I think also based on the National Development Plan, we want to entrench a dynamic system of professionalization. We want to strengthen and enable legal policy instruments. I think they've already indicated there. Where legislation doesn't allow us to do certain issues, the framework provides a platform and also proposals on how we can do that to ensure that the policy instruments are also enabling us to be able to professionalize the various categories of occupations, of which supply chain management and finance are also key critical occupations according to this. And we also want to enhance and build partnerships and relationships with higher education institutions, professional bodies, and other stakeholders in the state to ensure that we professionalize the public service, ensure a meritocratic public servant recruitment and selection and career management system, and also issues of consequence management. When people are not doing what they are supposed to do, we cannot treat it as business as usual. We need to deal with those critical issues to ensure that we are seen as public servants who are committed in serving the needs of our country. In terms of contextualization of the framework, is based on priority 6 of the medium-term strategic framework. And then this was, I think, it's priority 1, and before it was not priority 1, but I think the president has moved this one to the issue of building a capable, ethical and developmental state to be number 1, because it's very critical. And that's why you see the work that we have dealt with in terms and currently doing in terms of the professionalization of the public sector. A capable state needs to have the required human capabilities and institutional capacity, and also including issues of technological platforms to be able to perform our jobs. And an ethical state is going to be driven by constitutional values. And the last part, in a developmental state, we need to be able to meet people's needs through all the interventions, developmental, participatory public administration. And in terms of when the framework was designed, they did a lot of research actually, and there were other legal and other documents that were used to foreground this framework. The first part is the Constitution of our country, Section 195. And I think it's the only legal document that refers to public administration, because public administration refers to all spheres of government, organ of states and public enterprises. Therefore, this framework is foregrounded on that Section 195 because it applies to all institutions that are listed there, including traditional leaders. Your military, police, the state security and correctional services are also affected by this framework. The National Development Plan also stresses the issue of building a capable state so that we can fight corruption and enhance accountability. And in the 54th conference of our ruling party in 2017, they also identified key areas that needs to be addressed. The issue of the political administrative interface, you will see, we'll deal with it in the framework. The issue of intergovernmental systems and articulation of roles amongst the 3 spheres of government, the issue of developing technical and specialist professional skills, and also building a meritocratic professional public sector. Those were the key areas that were listed, they were discussed, and also the framework is foregrounded on that. In terms of the problem statement, these are some of the slides that we use because of, as Dr. Maja is saying, we're busy talking here. In terms of the problems that have been highlighted till to date, starting from the earliest years of our democracy, there's been a problem with issues of lack of skills, and those have actually weakened our municipalities. And you can see that in February 2012, there had been an article that was issued, and it talks about the lack of management experience and skills, which threaten the financial sustainability of many municipalities. And in terms of the LG-SETA also in 2018, the report also highlighted issues of skills shortages and also the issue of administrative ineptitude, which impede professionalization, absence of departmental plans and lack of monitoring, governance challenges, lack of leadership, and also political interference, and the issue of deficiency in the awareness of ethical values, which underpins HR policies. And furthermore, there are other research that were done in the Sector Skills Plan 2021-2022 of LG-SETA. It also speaks about the gaps in terms of skills that are required in that space. And also there is a consolidated general report on local government audit outcomes. Also, it speaks about the issue of lacks of skills, and reviews, several reviews and AG reports already provide ample data of what is missing actually in terms of curriculum and in terms of what we cannot do in the public sector. And there's also a system for capacity building for local government. There's a diagnostic overview. I think we have spent close to 40 billion in terms of local government capacity. But if you look now, will one say you see improvement or not after spending 40 billion in doing capacity building? Also in 2021, it's now recent. When you look again, what was released by Business Tech, it also talks about shortage of skills in terms of capacity and competency. This part covers areas of local government. And also in the national and provincial spheres of government, there was a diagnostic overview report that was issued. It also speaks to skills shortages. And then also it talks about the looming crisis in the reproduction of professional expertise while the aging cohort are leaving the system with their expertise and knowledge. And we don't have anything to substitute that now. And the issue of shortage of technical and managerial skills is seen mostly in your built environment where we outsource most of professional and technical services. And I also know that in some of the reports of the AG, we outsource even skills in finance, certain things in finance. Financial statements are designed by external people while we have people within the system who are appointed to perform those jobs. So part of the framework is to deal with those shortages to ensure that we have adequate capacity within the public sector. After 25 years, there was another report that was released again in 2019. We get the same results that, you know, we are still having a shortage of skills. At junior levels, there's insufficient focus to provide stimulating career pathing to ensure that we reproduce skills. And again, after 27 years, we haven't had any decisive interventions to professionalize the public sector. You see most of the results in terms of fruitless expenditure, service delivery protests, the violence and the fatalities that we see daily actually on our news. These are also reported. What foregrounds this framework? We looked at the three key terms there. We looked at the profession, which is the discipline itself. We look at professionalism for the individual and also professionalization of the whole public sector. What does it imply for the profession? To be professional will mean that we need to work and project ourselves in a way that will demonstrate superior levels of acquired knowledge, skills, and competencies, and also an exemplary conduct and commitment to our profession and also the codes of conduct. In terms of the individual, we want individuals who are going to demonstrate high work ethics and adhere to certain standards and principles that are specific to our work discipline and also the context. We look at our qualifications, competencies, skills, and values. For the public sector, I think Dr. Maja stressed this. We want to subject all employees to a single dispensation of professional registration and regulation. We want to recognize the various professional categories within the public sector and subject them to registration with external regulated professional bodies. I think you know by now that we do have your statutory professional bodies that have been established through an act of parliament. We also have other professional bodies that are recognized by SAQA in terms of the NQF Act. Those are some of the professional bodies that we felt that needs to be recognized in terms of working with so that we don't reproduce what is already existing within the system. The framework also identifies the 5 pillars on which we are going to professionalize the public sector. We want to take a public servant. The pillar 1 talks about pre-entry into the public sector. That's why it focuses on recruitment and selection. Once we have recruited and selected and appointed you, what's going to happen? In pillar 2, we focus on the induction and onboarding to make sure that that public servant will understand why we have appointed him or her, so that we take them through a process for induction. And also the third pillar, while you have been inducted, knowing what is expected of you, we have to manage your performance within the system. And as we manage your performance, we need to take you through a process for continuing learning and professional development. As we have indicated earlier from the other speaker, that you cannot think that what you learned in 1995 is still applicable in 2023. And also the issue of career progression, issues of succession planning, and also the managing of career incidents of your heads of department, which means the framework also applies from your lowest level of the employee in the public sector up to your highest level of your HODs and DGs. In Pillar 1, we have identified the following key areas that needs to be done for pre-entry. We are saying for recruitment and appointment, it should be done through merit. A person appointed in the public sector, they must meet the requirements for the position, which means it's very critical for HR as they design those adverts to make sure that they write adverts as expected of that person that needs to join the public sector for that position. And we want to review the pre-entry Nyukela course and extend it to all other levels in the public sector. And I want to assure you that the NSG has already drafted its implementation plan, and the Nyukela is being under review. And we'll extend this Nyukela to be implemented in local government and also in the state-owned entities, and also those other departments that I've indicated in the first slide when I was doing my presentation. And also we need to introduce compulsory occupation-based competency and integrity assessment. Currently, the competency-based assessment is not used for recruitment, it's used for support. So it must be used for appointment. That's what the framework is calling for. If you didn't pass this, you cannot be appointed for the position. Integrity assessment, we cannot appoint people who are unethical, and later we discover that you have criminal records and so forth because we didn't check in terms of this. You have to undergo also the integrity assessment before you enter SMS. By 2025, we want to review academic qualifications for entry into SMS level 14 to 16, including for CEOs of SOEs and municipal managers to NQF level 8 and NQF level 9 will be highly recommended, because currently I think in local government is level 6, with us I think it's level 7. So this by 2025 needs to be reviewed. The issue of internship with entry orientation needs to be reviewed, and also review SMS and MMS competency framework. The introduction of the Public Service Commission in terms of recruitment of your DDGs and DGs and also your municipal managers. PSC needs to create a pool of technical experts where our EAs will be able to source competent people to sit and support them in their recruitment process. These people are not add-ons, they must be part of the selection process. And in terms of municipal managers, representatives from provincial treasury must form part of the panel in the recruitment process, because you can't be a municipal manager if you don't even understand finances while you're going to manage millions of the country. And in number 9, the recruitment of commissioners in the public commission. Also, we need experts to sit in the recruitment and selection process. The issue of collaboration with higher education institution and also professional bodies in curriculum design. And I know that National Treasury spoke about these areas in terms of how to collaborate to ensure that the curriculum that is offered to the learners at university for SCM meets the requirements of the system, because you know there should be that relationship that when you enter the system you are able to hit the ground running, but currently it's not happening. And the other issue that we didn't list here is the issue of CHE, because CHE is a standard setter in the country. They develop standards for qualification. It's another partner that we need to work with to ensure that they ensure that all supply chain management qualification speaks to what we are doing in the public sector. In terms of Pillar 2 for induction, participation in compulsory induction programs, NSG has been running this but the issue is that people attend induction after a year and so forth. This framework calls for immediate attendance after appointment, or if not possible, within 90 days of appointment. New entrants in the public sector needs to go for induction. And then also reorientation. I think Dr. Majaya stressed this. You cannot be comfortable and say I'm a senior manager for 15 years, but you are still doing things that you learned 15 years. We need to reorientate you to ensure that we capacitate you to understand the new developments. And also the issue of coaching and mentoring programs at senior management and specialist and technical position needs to be provided as part of onboarding within your 6 months of appointment. I know NSG is doing a lot in terms of this area for senior managers. Who should participate? We have extended this not only for public service, it moves to your local government, your state-owned entities, your institutions of traditional leadership, and also the security cluster need to participate here, and staff appointed into political and also offices and their advisors. In terms of Pillar 3 for performance management, Cabinet approved that DPSA should review the performance management of heads of departments and DDGs. We need to link the performance of the HODs and DDGs to that of the institution. If the institution is not performing, the DG and the DDG cannot say they are also performing. Also to introduce independent triggers for exiting non-performing HODs, improve the competence of politicians to manage performance, and also address the systemic challenges that result in instability and poor relationships between the executive authorities and the HODs. For DPME, to review institutional planning and performance management systems to ensure alignment across the administration and to optimize the nexus between planning and performance management. There should be a relationship between the two. We cannot have APPs that are not linked to our performance. And also the review of performance management system by DPSA across the system. DPMS, the performance management development tools needs to be reviewed to be fit for purpose. The issue of consequence management needs to be introduced for non-compliance. People don't even submit or complete this document, so they need to be taken through a process of consequence management. And also we need to align the performance management system with professional body registration. And I think Dr. Maja stressed that. And PSC has been given a rule to form part of performance evaluation of our heads of department, because we believe that they will bring a objectivity if you look at the issues we raised under DPSA to review. So if we have an independent body to sit there to ensure that there is objectivity. Pillar 4, which is very critical, I think, for the audience who are here. I'm not going to list all the professions there, you can see them. I'm going to focus on the role of National Treasury here. They need to reform the SCM because in 2014, Cabinet issued a resolution that we need to establish an SCM council to make sure that we professionalize the supply chain management. I think that's very critical. These other professions that are listed here are very key and critical for us to ensure that as we start professionalizing, not to say other professions are not critical, but this one for the country, I think most of our problems are coming from these professions. Most of the irregular expenditure and whatever things come from SCM, these people, if they can do what they're expected to do, won't see issues that happened at the Zondo Commission. And the issue of legal profession also, we are paying them on OSD, but we outsource their work to other people. They need to be professionalized so that we cannot pay two warm bodies while we have the other in the office. The audit and risk profession also need to be professionalized. And also the built environment, because we also outsource, we spend a lot of billions in that sector while we have warm bodies in offices. As we professionalize them to make sure that they're able to sign out contracts for the government instead of us appointing external people to do the work. And then in terms of the Minister of Science and Technology and SAQA, they need to support us to assess the professional bodies that are actually recognized by SAQA for representativity and transformation, because we don't want to subject our employees to professional bodies who are still lagging behind. They need to have capacity to deliver what this framework wants them to deliver. And in terms of continuation of Pillar 4, in terms of the issue of training and learning pathways, the NSG is required to determine appropriate training learning pathways to assist in the professionalization of those categories that we have listed. And the professionalization of public finance management and SCM, it is the role of Treasury. The framework proposed that, and it has been approved by Cabinet. You need to amend the regulation with regard to minimum competency level requirements for prospective employees in public finance and SCM in the public sector. You need to ensure those minimum requirements before you appoint people in certain positions, and also ensure that they are licensed to practice in the space by the relevant professional bodies and council. And for appointments as a CFO into SMS level 13 and 14 and equivalent, review qualifications to be at least level 8. For SMS 15, 8 will be a minimum requirement, but level 9 will be highly recommended. That should also apply in local government. If you are appointed in those finance positions, you need to have level 8 qualification for you to work in an SCM management position. And in terms of Pillar 5, this is the last pillar, political administrative interface. Here, the Cabinet resolved that the DG presidency will be designated as hopper. In terms of the tenure of HODs and DGs and municipal managers should be increased up to 10 years. However, it's not a blanket. There should be a rigorous process for recruitment and selection. There should be continuous training and development, and also performance management reviews, and also consequence management for non-compliance, which means we can't keep them in the system if they're not delivering. The critical one is the revolving door policy. And I think if you can look at the last part, it says manage conflict of interest with those departments that might create conflict of interest. Cabinet said a Treasury cannot participate in a revolving door policy where private sector and whoever comes in and out, because you are highly conflicted. And it's not only Treasury and other departments like your SARS and so forth. So this revolving door policy, it needs to be reviewed by the DPSA to ensure that it's used optimally to allow for movement of identified public servants between the private sector, academia, and from public sector to that side, vice versa. And also we need to consider appointment of external candidates for DDGs and DG positions, because currently the policies of the DPSA do not allow us to appoint people who are outside the public sector to be appointed in this position. The issue of the review of the RPL policy, we want to explore the possibility of using RPL for recruitment in the public sector, and also the issue of the Minister of Public Service and Administration to determine us to open an RPL assessment center in the public sector. In terms of the framework, certain departments need to adopt and implement the framework. Lead departments and institutions were supposed to finalize this by February 2023, and which means a Treasury falls in this lead department. SALGA to adopt the framework. Good news is that yesterday they published, SALGA, our minister, published the adoption of this framework by SALGA. Local government is working hard to make sure that they prepare their implementation plans. We have supported them until they reach the stage to adopt the framework. Thorough consultations were done. And also the legislative sector also needs to adopt the framework. State-owned entities also and their shareholder ministers needs to adopt it. And currently as the NSG, we are supporting them, working with them. Soon we'll be announcing that it has been adopted and there is a willingness to implement. The implementation plans for Treasury, it needs to indicate your short, medium, and long term. And also recommendation that requires legislative amendments need to be done. And others are going to be done, especially for PAMA and the PSA bill. I think others have been adopted already. And then in terms of closing, SALGA has adopted the framework. We also need to finalize the single public service legislation, where we are not going to have a separation of a public service and others on the site. And DPSA and COGTA and SALGA working together on this one. The National Treasury needs to design their implementation plan. In their implementation plan, they need to indicate the timeline, short-term, medium, and long-term goals, and the occupational categories that are under in terms of this framework. For National Treasury, it's finance. They need to register, ensure that they register with professional bodies. I don't think in finance we need a new one. That, if I'm not wrong, we've got close to 6 or 7 that are recognized by SAQA. And you need to also assess whether they are competent enough to be able to deliver what is required in terms of professionalizing your finance officials. And also the establishment of a professional council for SCM. Also, it's required to be done by Treasury, and this is very urgent. The NSG has already designed an advocacy plan. Currently, this is advocacy for the supply chain and finance group. And we are here as the NSG willing to assist and support the departments, the lead departments, in implementing their plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nyaga, for allaying Dr. Maja's fears that we are talking about implementation at this point. Definitely. And thanks for confirming that this professionalization is actually a implementation of Section 10 or Chapter 10 of the Constitution, Section 195, which is about creation of a value-based and principled public administration. And the fact that local government through SALGA has adopted the framework indicates that it's possible that we should stop separating ourselves in the form of saying others are local government and others are public service. So the single public services is possible, and therefore seamless implementation of service delivery aspects is also possible. And thanks for confirming that this is about ensuring that we have a competent public service. The principal of the National School of Government, Professor Busani Ngqaweni, like saying that we should return to the simulator. It's a symbolic aspect of saying even experienced public servants need to always go back and upskill and reskill themselves. So we have to return to the simulator like the pilots. The framework, colleagues, you may feel that you are now, those of you who are seeing it for the first time, that sort of like you are bombarded with so much information, but you definitely have a way of going back and read properly also. The framework is available on the website. Because it's already approved by cabinet, it's also available even if you do simple Google search, as long as you name it properly, professionalization framework of the public sector. And also in the website of the NSG, which is www.thensg.gov.za. So thanks for clarifying various roles that you have indicated, including how the NSG intends to review programs like preemptive to the senior management echelons, which is called the Nyukela, and as well as reminding Treasury that there's a role to establish a supply chain management council. So this is all about the importance of ensuring that we implement the framework. Let us move on with our program to the DPME and allow Dr. Victor Naidoo of the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. DPME is part of the presidency, as you recall, and he will talk to us about the role of DPME in the planning, monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of the framework. Over to you, Dr. Victor.
Thank you, Dr. Johnny Peterson. My presentation will focus on how the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation responds to issues of implementing the national framework towards professionalization of the public sector. The presentation is a form of advocacy, even within the DPME, Dr. Peterson, and The presentation that I'm doing with the discussions that follow will be then communicated with my Director General, Dr. Robert Nkuna, who will then discuss these issues in the executive management meeting to get all the executive management members to come on board so that they could take ownership and take forward in this framework in participating in the relevant committees that you're going to set up. So as part of the advocacy, this is the presentation. I just want to respond to Dr. Maja, Dr. Bachabella's Maja's issues and Dr. Faith before I continue. Firstly, I think there is a need for the focus on doing, but Dr. Maja, doing the right things. So there's too much on our plate, so we need to select what we have to prioritize and do it rightly. Then the issue around 1940 qualifications, it speaks directly to me. If you sit in one place with the 1940 qualifications, then that professional will be not relevant to the public service. But what comes in handy is, what does the individual do? Does the individual sit and wait for someone else to provide opportunities for learning? Or the individual, like myself and many others in the public service, have taken the responsibility, the agency, to take charge of their own learning. So you continuously enroll for and pay and do it part-time because you're passionate about improving yourself and continuously unlearning and relearning, learning new things so that you are relevant and could contribute to the performance of yourself and the organization and the state. So I think the role of individual agency is very important here, Dr. Maja. How do individuals take responsibility for their own career paths? And if you look at my own journey in the last 40 years or more, and I'm close to retirement, I was not fortunate to have the opportunity of a natural progression in terms of career pathing. I had to resign 5 times in my career path until I became a director in the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. I had to resign 5 times because there were blockages in terms of proceeding to the next level. So what I'm saying is, the narrative that we are now building around the 5 pillars should be problematized further to say what are some of the barriers and power relations that exist within the system that will prevent an individual from naturally progressing from one level to the other. So what I'm saying here is I'm going to highlight the role of individual agency, the power of individual agency in managing their own career path, provided this framework will provide the enabling environment, but we cannot disempower or take away the responsibility for to continuously learn and be a professional. We cannot hand that power to the School of Government or any other departments. And I think it's individual employees will have to take responsibility for their own learning also. And that's a key point. I think we move on to the next slide. The vision was clearly stated by Ms. Faith Inyaka that the framework seeks to provide the state with the opportunity, key actions to institutionalize public sector as a profession of choice with the career system on meritocracy, ethical disposition. So it's a clear vision, very ideal and noble that we need to strive towards. There's some general observations and introductory comments. Having read your framework, Firstly, there's a very clear description of the problem, vision, objectives, the concepts of profession, professionalization, and professionalism clearly defined and categorized. This outcomes and why the policy is important is clearly stated. Framework has clear conceptual parts, the 5 pillars. And these are some of the issues that I want to raise at the introduction. The framework needs to take into account the context in which it will be implemented. It's not a neutral context. It's a complex system. Complex in the terms of constitutional powers of national and provincial departments and local government departments. Complex in terms of the intergovernmental relationships that we have. Complex in terms of the myriad of structures that we have to navigate to implement this policy. So we have to take into account and unpack this complexity in terms of the context in which this framework has to be implemented. And underneath the complexity is the issue of power relations that exist in the system. It's the formal power relations in terms of the constitutional powers of the national department in relation to provincial and local government, or vice versa, the powers of the municipality in relation to the national department, provincial and national department. So within a department, there could be serious issues around, or you have mentioned, Ms. Nyaka, the power relations between the minister and the HOD could really bog the system, or the power relation between the supervisor and the supervisee in a department could affect the implementation of the system. So one has to look at this relationships between people and structures, and what are the risks involved if we don't deal with these relationships. All right, so we have to take into account the complex context and the power relationships between structures and relationships within and between departments and levels. Then I want to make a point that what we are doing here is a process. You cannot do it in a year. You cannot do it in the next year. It's a long journey that we're going to walk together in terms of implementing bits and pieces of the system. And we need to prioritize which parts we need to build first. So this implementation is a long journey. It's based on continuous reflections and adaptations over time. So we should not be too ambitious to have this done in 2024 in terms of our APP target. It's going to be another 30-year plan to put this on, to get this working. The implementation of the framework is not a technical process, but a social process, meaning it's not about interfering with the legislation or designing a new course or training officials. It's about involving multiple social actors in working together in implementing, in terms of your advocacy, in terms of buy-in, in terms of planning. And he said that the Department of Public Service Administration, Dr. Peterson has not given an opportunity to do the presentation before me, because they are the custodians of this framework. And as custodians, they should own and they should provide leadership in providing us the next step to say, how do we take the public policy, the national framework, and translate it into a comprehensive program plan with clear timeframes and budgets, so that, and clarified roles and responsibilities, so that we can get everyone on board. So the leadership role of DPSA is critical in terms of setting up a steering committee and developing a comprehensive plan. And I think we need to address that. We cannot go forward by just a dialogue like this without having a plan. How do we translate the public policy into a comprehensive program plan? Okay, the next point here is, this was covered by Faith Inyaka in terms of the objectives and the pillars. We'll move on. The next slide. Yeah, I think this is an important slide. You have a set of objectives, Dr. Marja, in terms of the outcomes. Now, the question is, I asked earlier, what do we prioritize? I think what I've done here is try to repackage the outcomes into immediate, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. You could discuss this at no time, and maybe we could come to some agreement. But from my perspective, I see that the immediate outcome is to build on the existing systems within government. The framework builds on existing DPSA, HRM&D policies and prescripts and systems. So we need to build on that. So if you see, the immediate outcome is around honesty. And that's where the stress point, and as the President has mentioned, in terms of how do we deal with corruption in the state? How do we deal with addressing some of the recommendations of the Zondo Commission? So corruption, dealing with corruption is our first priority. So that's an immediate outcome: high ethical professional standards and efficient use of state resources. The second one is around what immediate changes do we make in policy to facilitate the implementation of the professionalization framework. The third immediate outcome will be creating a meritocratic and ethical career system. And here I aligned it with the pillars. The fourth one is develop career development practices in terms of continuous learning. And the fifth one is the performance management practices. So these are immediate outcomes that could inform the plan and the implementation. And it could go over the next MTSF cycle. Now, these immediate outcomes will contribute to change in service delivery, creating a development-oriented public service, creating partnerships, and then perhaps mobilizing professional bodies so that public servants will be registered. So the immediate outcome is to strengthen the pillars. Remember what we are assuming here, Dr. Marja, is that the current system is functional. And that's wrong. The current system is dysfunctional. We find that the performance management and development system, it is gamed and is compliance driven. So if you want to bring about a change, you need to immediately review and strengthen the current system, which forms the bedrock of the national framework for professionalization. So the immediate attention is to fix the pillars, the current system, which and we are assuming that the current system is functional. So, or is partly functional. So what we have to do is put our energies in fixing the current system, because they are the key pillars of your framework. So this is sort of, all this will contribute in building public confidence and trust in government. So this will be helpful in developing your program plan. Okay, we move forward. Now, what is the implication for Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation? As you know, that the National Planning Commission is a custodian of the long-term plan. And what I've seen is we need to ensure alignment of this framework to the NDP. And there's a degree of alignment. And the key actions for the National Planning Commission as the custodian of the NDP is to make the framework a key critical intervention in terms of contributing to building a capable and ethical state. So it should be a key intervention that could now be foregrounded in Chapter 8 of the NDP. Then the National Planning Commission should monitor and report on the implementation across the sectors. So that's key at a high level. The second key action on the National Planning Commission is to facilitate research and critical dialogue with key stakeholders. Could be higher education, occupational councils, CETAs, professional bodies. And I think we have to pay attention to unions, the labor, because if the professionalized framework is promoting deregistration or dealing with consequence, we have to bring unions on board. And the absence of not engaging with unions could also be a potential risk in terms of implementing the professionalization framework. So we move on. Ms. Nyaka has very, very eloquently showed that the professionalization framework is located within priority 1 in relation to our 5-year country plan, 2019-2024, and it's in priority 1, which cuts across other priorities. Capable, ethical, and development state. So it is included in our key priority of government. What I want to show you in the next slide is as a quick win, Dr. Peterson and Dr. March, as a quick win for the NSG and Department of Public Service Administration is to look at your current objectives and align it to the interventions of our current medium-term strategic framework interventions. You will find that although this is the last year of the MTSF, there has been much progress in terms of the interventions contributing to the outcomes of the MTSF. So if you could align your objectives of the framework, you could start reporting on some progress in terms of the implementation. And I've just tried to demonstrate that through tabulating the current outcomes of the MTSF, the current intervention. And I've made an attempt to look at selecting and showing the relationship. For example, I'll just take the first bit. The outcome of the MTSF is to create a capable and ethical state. And the intervention that has been identified by some coordinating departments within the cluster is to facilitate implementation of the anti-corruption strategy and to have a program to prevent and fight corruption in government. There are 2 interventions. And then if you look at the objectives of the new professionalization framework, it talks about promotion of high standards of professional ethics and efficient use of resources. So there are current biannual and midterm reports by the lead departments in relation to this, in relation to the progress that has been made in terms of implementing the interventions. So what the NSG and DPSA could do is to take this evidence and demonstrate that there is some progress in terms of creating an ethical government. So the evidence is available, and it's a quick win to demonstrate there's some degree of implementation that is already happening in terms of the MTSF. So that's the point I want to make here. So I'll go on to the next one. The next one. These are just showing you examples of the alignment. Here I want to show you, let's just go back. Yeah, the outcome of creating a professional, meritocratic and ethical public administration seems to be very much close to the vision and outcomes of the national framework of professionalization. Here we have programs, the current intervention from the NSG, it says a program for building a professional public admin, and you have 5 mandatory courses. And you have reported against this, you have achieved the target. But the question is, are these courses making a difference? And I think Ms. Louis Lepant raised this in my last meeting, to move away from just compliance reporting to ask deeper questions around what difference is this courses and the training making in terms of contributing towards organizational performance and improving service delivery. So we have to now go beyond just training to look at the impact of the training. And I think NSGs and colleagues are aware of this in terms of assessing value for money and the difference that training makes in terms of performance of the state and service delivery. So professionalization in terms of training should contribute directly to improved performance of the state and better service delivery for citizens. There should not be now creating an animal where we just all are feeding ourselves with courses and more courses without making a difference and giving more power and ego to individuals. That's not the vision of the professionalization of the framework. No, it's to provide better services to citizens. If there's no correlation between that, then there's a challenge. So we need to look at, if we have the stability in provision of electricity to all citizens, then you see there's a direct correlation between developing technical skills in the energy sector that will contribute to and technical skills in governance, technical skills in managerial areas of the energy sector to enable the citizens to experience no disruptions of power shedding and so on. So we have to now prioritize. That's what the thing is. Which sector do we prioritize in applying this? We can't just talk about all sectors. So we need to, again, the question is, what do we do first in order to show that the framework has a direct benefit to citizens? Okay, this is a possible location of the reporting of the professionalization framework. If we still keep this outcome, I'll just show that as a red as an intervention. Okay, move on. Move on, Kulsum. Right. So to repeat what I'm saying is, we could have a quick win for NSG and DPSA to report on the implementation by looking at the evidence that we have with regards to the interventions in the current framework. And we also have to look at how the issues that are raised in the framework informs the next cycle of the MTSF 2024-2029. I'm just going to look at key issues here. One, in terms of the framework, there is a need for an implementation program with a monitoring and reporting framework to be developed by DPSA, and since they are the custodians. And they should initiate the formation of a steering committee with the terms of reference that clearly clarifies the roles of the steering committee, roles and responsibilities to monitor and evaluate and provide strategic leadership in implementing this framework. So that's quite critical to take this framework forward. Second issue here, in terms of our current MTSF, there's an intervention around stabilizing political administrative interface with the following targets. I just had to elaborate the previous slides to show that this is a key issue that is mentioned in the framework. The role of the PSC must be strengthened. The head of administration need to be finalized. The DG in the presidency should be designated as head of public administration, and in the provinces, there should be a provincial DG in the office of the premier. There is progress in relation to this, and there's sufficient evidence to report on how this has been implemented in our biannual reports and our midterm report of the MTSF. Move on. Implication for the national planning system. Since DPME is a custodian of both national and provincial strategic and annual department plans, we find that the DPME planning branch needs to ensure that plans that are received from national and provincial departments relate to the issues raised in the framework. So the plans will develop implementable programs in relation to the objectives of the professionalization framework. So when there is a moderation of this plans, DPME officials will ensure that there is key areas that the department is responsible for will be included in the plan. Okay, the professionalization of the planning sector, again, there's a lot of talk around creating a professional body. So there needs to be some work around this in terms of a concept paper to see how we take forward professionalizing the planning occupation. DPME to facilitate the development of a qualifications pathway to see how planners can be enrolled into courses and have a clear qualification pathway where they will be fully qualified. And the need for partnerships with professional bodies is critical. Then you have, in terms of the issue around DPSA and DPME need to work closely together to ensure this integration of how the plans of departments are related to plans of the performance agreements of individuals. So this has to be worked out through some sort of policy prescription. Finally, close to being final, the implication for sector monitoring, like health, education, social development, local government, to ensure that the professionalization framework with regards to technical and specialist professional skills, delegation, accountability, oversight, development of SOEs, for example, ISCOM and Transnet. This framework is directly seen in their implementation plans and are reported. And I think here we have to ensure that the next MTSF cycle, in the next MTSF cycle, we have the key elements of the framework being included, reported, and measured. Okay, the next point. Next. In terms of evaluation, in terms of the national evaluation policy framework, there's a need to evaluate the implementation of the program, and this could be part of the National Evaluation Annual Plan. So there will be two types of evaluations. There could be an implementation evaluation of key interventions annually, and there could be also a planned impact evaluation at the end of the 3 or 5 year period. So evaluations are critical in terms of making a judgment of whether the program is on track or there's a need to improve the program in terms of implementation, in terms of impact, to look at what are the key lessons learned and how we could rethink the interventions within the framework. Okay, next point, concluding remarks. Again, we cannot overestimate the role of Department of Public Service Administration as a custodian of this framework. To lead, provide a comprehensive plan with a clear theory of change. The program plan should foreground the assumptions, risks, and mitigation strategy. Again, DPSA has to set up structures and mechanisms, steering committees to lead this process. DPSA, again, should play a key role in reviewing the existing embedded human resource management and development system, so that we shift from compliance to strengthening the existing system on which the professionalization framework is built on. And with regards to the National School of Government, there's an opportunity to think about resourcing yourselves as a school with the principal managing experienced and qualified professionals and academics. So we're moving away from being a service provider with project managers, with having professionals who are qualified to teach and facilitate registered and academic professional courses and qualifications. Again, to rethink the building of the capacity of National School of Government to be able to lead on providing continuous professional development, which is the key pillar of the framework. In the medium term, the professionalization framework provides an opportunity. Again, now Dr. Maja, I'm pushing this to you. There's a great deal of dependency in this framework that there will be professional bodies that will be there, and public servants will register with the professional bodies. There is no professional body for planning. There is no professional body for monitoring. There's no professional bodies yet for evaluation. So I think as a way to fast track the framework, we need to see public administration as a profession, and we need to take leadership in establishing a professional body for public administration. In that way, we'll get all officials in public administration to register, and then there will be memorandum of understanding with other professions and professional bodies. So all public administration officials will register to the professional body. This body will promote professional development as a condition to keep their registration. And this professional body will maintain and protect the ethical conduct and professional standards. And as you have said, if they behave untowardly, unethically, then they will be debarred. Okay. Finally, the professionalization framework has a potential to set up a system to produce competent ethical professionals who are committed to improve service delivery. We already have a lot of good, hardworking, committed, and ethical professionals within the public service. What we have to do is motivate the current cohort of professionals, and the new entrants could use them as role models, and there should be a direct link between the professionalization framework to improving service delivery and regaining public trust in government. I think with those comments, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victor Naidu. Worth noting is that you were saying or warning us or ensuring that we treat the framework, professional framework, as a process, prioritize the right things so that we can do the right things. And importantly, I know that you have done what a Setswana Proverbs wants us to do. The Setswana Proverbs that says that, Molaya Khosi wa itaela. Loosely translated, that proverb says, whoever advises the king or the chief must know that that advice is going to manage him or her. So you have done that because you have gone into your own role and indicated how you will work with DPSA to ensure integrated planning, because the public sector relies on you guiding in as far as monitoring evaluation and integrated planning in the public sector. So it is quite acknowledged. And then also the fact that you are saying DPSA is important applies to all the departments, since all of us have to indicate as to how we'll ensure that we implement the framework in our context. And just beyond giving us the tools like APP, annual performance plans and strategic planning, it's important to also look at those tools as to how they accommodate the professionalization aspects. Quite often in public service, we say we are challenged by the fact that we just comply because the tangibles are the only ones that are measurable. These tools must also help us with how we measure the intangibles. How do we measure public trust? How do we measure service delivery in our communities? So those aspects are important to accommodate in our own planning, and we rely very highly on GPME for guidance in this regard. Let us now move on to AGSA, which is the Auditor General Office of South Africa, and we will have a talk by Ms. Zahira Ravat. She's a CA, or Chartered Accountant and Registered Auditor. She's a Senior Manager in the Technical Audit Support Unit of the AGSA and focuses on governance and controls. She has extensive experience in areas of internal audit. Zahira is a member of the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions Committee of Internal Controls, the Public Sector Audit Committee Forum, and the International Public Sector Committee. Over to you, Ms. Zahira Ravat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peterson, and good morning to you, fellow speakers and delegates on the webinar. Today, I will discuss the role of the AGSA in auditing the implementation of the professionalization framework. I'm just waiting for the slides to come up from Kulsum. Thanks so much, Kulsum. We can go to slide 2. All right, so the AGSA is the Supreme Audit Institution of South Africa through our constitutional mandate. And we exist to strengthen our country's democracy by enabling oversight, accountability, and governance in the public sector through auditing. And through that, we build public confidence. It is our vision to be recognized by all our stakeholders as a relevant Supreme Audit institution that enhances public sector accountability. Esteemed delegates, in discussing the AGSA's role in auditing the implementation of the framework on the professionalization of the public sector, I will be focusing on the current challenges as they relate to the quality of financial and performance reporting, key insights on supply chain management, as well as the expectations of role players in the accountability ecosystem with respect to the implementation of the framework. Through our audits over the years and in previous general reports, we've highlighted the challenges with respect to skills and capacity in the financial and performance reporting units at our auditees. And this results in a lack of accountability, transgression of legislation, and poor performance. Ultimately, these challenges have a very negative impact on the lived experiences of our citizens. If we move on to slide 4. Credible financial statements are very important for enabling accountability and transparency. When considering the quality of the financial statements that we received in PFMA 2021-22, more than half of the auditees continued to submit poor quality financial statements for auditing. And if we consider what this effectively means, it's that for the AGSA, if we did not identify misstatements in these financial statements, and had we not given the auditees the chance to correct them, only 48% of the auditees with completed audits would have received an unqualified audit opinion, compared to the 78% that ultimately received this outcome. So you can see from this that there's quite a lot of effort that comes in from the AGSA side just to enhance the quality of the financial statements. If we move on to the next slide, we have a similar situation for performance reports for PFMA 2021-22. Here as well, more than half of the auditees submitted poor quality performance reports. And I think the overall impact of this is that when auditees do not have credible data and information or adequate performance information systems, it really affects their ability to plan for service delivery. It affects their ability to respond to any potential challenges and make decisions in a relevant and timely manner. So, for example, if a department cannot reliably measure the number of schools that have access to sanitation facilities, they cannot possibly respond to the needs of the learners. Moving on to the next slide, which looks at irregular expenditure. Irregular expenditure for PFMA 2021-22 is very high. It is 423.6 billion rand. And concerning about this picture is that it is increasing on an upward trend from previous years. Next slide. If we look at this picture, you will see that very little was done about the prior year's balance. That is the 2020-21 irregular expenditure balance of 408.5 billion. 93% of the balance was not dealt with in any way. So we're not seeing any progress in this regard. When we move on to the MFMA picture, the next slide, MFMA 2020-21 is similarly bleak. We've got 75% of our auditees who were not able to submit quality financial statements, despite the salary cost for the finance units totaling 10.4 billion rand. With respect to proper record keeping, daily and monthly controls, the in-year and year-end reporting, as well as the review and monitoring compliance controls, they were mainly in the area of concern or intervention required. You know, there's a very small percentage of these controls which we are considering to be good. In addition to this, internal audits at 93% of these municipalities and audit committees at 96% of these municipalities did review the financial statements when they were prepared. If we then add to that the cost of consultants used, which amounted to 1.26 billion, there's a lot of activity that's taking place in the preparation of these financial reports, but we're not seeing the results of this. All of this while the cost of consultants doubled over the term of the previous administration. So it is quite clear that the financial investment by the state into the preparation of quality financial statements does not seem to have a return on investment. If we move on, with respect to the performance reports in MFMA 2020-21, similarly dismal, 74% of the auditees submitted poor quality performance reports. Moving on to the irregular expenditure for MFMA, it's very high. And it continues to grow. And also, we see that 89% of the prior year's balance was not dealt with. Accounting officers, senior managers, internal auditors all had a role to play in the preparation and finalization of the performance reports and financial statements. The skills and competence of these role players needs to be enhanced to increase the quality of these reports and consequently the performance of the auditees. In terms of sharing our key insights on procurement and contract management on the next slide. In 2022, government spending amounted to 2.2 trillion rand. The sheer magnitude of the spending highlights the importance of public procurement in our economy. This figure is expected to rise to 2.5 trillion in coming years, and it's no surprise that public procurement and expenditure is regarded as a critical indicator of the effectiveness of a government, because it is a central aspect of service delivery. With severely constrained resources, government must ensure that it has an efficient and effective procurement and provisioning system. Despite various reforms made to date in public sector procurement in South Africa, the South African public procurement system still faces many challenges, and there's a widespread culture of non-compliance, which results in poor use of state funds, ineffective service delivery, and it has effectively enabled a breeding ground for fraud and corruption. Some of these issues were highlighted in the Zondo Commission reports. The public procurement has become increasingly complex with the rise of technology and the move towards digitization and artificial intelligence. This rapidly changing environment, in addition with the magnitude of the government expenditure, requires government to ensure that the public expenditure must be entrusted to officials that have the necessary knowledge, skills, and experience to utilize constrained resources in the most effective and efficient manner. And in doing so, they will ensure successful delivery and minimal wastage. Based on the importance of public procurement and public expenditure, it comes as no surprise, really, that the Zondo Commission made certain recommendations to ensure an effective and efficient public procurement system, which is also free from fraud and corruption. One of the key recommendations in that regard is the need for professionalization within the public procurement space, as mentioned by Dr. Maja. This was also highlighted by government through the NEP, which recognized the importance of professionalization within the public sector. Our insights on procurement and contract management over the years reveal that there's been an increase in material non-compliances with applicable procurement legislation, which includes instances where legislation is either not applied or it's applied incorrectly due to the misrepresentation of these legal instruments, or even through negligence in many cases. One of the key pillars of public procurement is fairness, which may be compromised by officials who lack integrity and fail to adequately declare their interests. Non-disclosure of conflicts of interest are at times deliberate to conceal personal relations with suppliers that do business with the state. We also observe that there is not always value for money, and higher than market rates are often paid for goods and services, which places a lot of pressure on the fiscus. It is our view that professionalization of public procurement officials would be a positive step to addressing and rooting out common and persistent irregularities, as well as the associated high economic costs, social costs, and poor compliance that negatively impact service delivery as a result of these non-compliances and irregularities. If we move on to the next slide, when we consider the national framework in relation to the work of the AGSA. Next slide, please, Wilson. Right, we are very keen to see successful implementation of the professionalization framework and view the framework as an improvement in government policy. I'm not going to go into all the details of the key principles of the framework because Ms. Inyaka and Dr. Naidu have quite aptly already explained these. But the rejuvenation of the Bagatelle principles are likely to result in improved service experiences by citizens. Overall, we feel that the key principles discussed in the framework, such as meritocratic appointments, ethics, and good HR practices, will result in behaviors and performance by public service employees that will result in improved service delivery to the public. These principles are very much aligned to the AGSA strategy for 2030 on shifting public sector culture towards good performance, transparency, integrity, as well as accountability. Our ultimate aim is to improve the lives of ordinary citizens by sustainably and efficiently shifting public sector culture through the insights that we have from our audits, influencing relevant role players, and enforcement where this is required. If we move on to the next slide, we have the accountability ecosystem from the AGSA point of view, which is a comprehensive model that reflects the network of stakeholders that have a mandate and or responsibility, whether legislative or moral, to drive, deepen, and insist on public sector accountability. Included in this model are all the role players who have a role to play in the lived experiences of citizens, such as the officials, accounting officers, accounting authorities, senior management, internal audit, audit committees, executive authorities, public accounts committees, parliament, provincial legislatures, oversight committees, and coordinating departments such as presidency, DPME, DPSA, national treasury, the provincial treasuries, cooperative governance, as well as the offices of the premier. The top part of our model really just summarizes for specific MFMA terminology and the bottom for PFMA specific terminology. But effectively, you know, the role players within this model are those who have and are going to have an impact on the lived experiences of citizens in South Africa. All of these role players have a function to play in ensuring the successful implementation of the professionalization framework. Accounting officers, senior managers, and internal audit need to be professionalized. In addition to that, they also have a further role to play in ensuring that employees that report to them are professionalized. DPSA, as the custodians of the framework, need to ensure that the required support and capacity to enable implementation of the framework are in place, in addition to ensuring that the required compliance monitoring processes and procedures are in place during and after implementation of the framework within the DPSA functions to ensure that they meet their mandate. Through the DPME mandate, planning, monitoring, and evaluation of the implementation of the framework must be enabled. Treasuries will need to ensure complete and accurate budgeting for the activities required for implementation of the framework. National Treasury further has a critical role in dealing with the challenges that the internal audit and audit committees within this accountability ecosystem face. There is definitely a need to strengthen those role players in the accountability ecosystem. Audit committees and oversight committees have a role to play by keeping the implementation of the framework on their agendas and within their sight to ensure that progress from professionalization initiatives is realized. Effective oversight on the professionalization activities are anticipated to result in weaknesses in the control environments being addressed and an improvement in financial and performance reporting quality with resulting positive impact on service delivery and an improvement in the lived reality of citizens. The concept of working together to strengthen accountability calls on all role players to work together and positively influence their areas of responsibility towards the better management of public resources and service delivery. We move on to the next slide. The AGSA will remain close to developments for implementation of the professionalization framework, and we will conduct research on how these developments impact the audit approach. The 5 pillars of the value chain on professionalization will be our focus. As you are aware, these are included in the framework and address recruitment and selection, induction and onboarding, planning and performance management, continuous learning and professional development, as well as career progression aspects. We will be using the 5 pillars of the value chain on professionalization to plan and direct our audit efforts, and the AGSA approach will receive relevant updates insofar as they relate to the AGSA mandate on the audit of financial statements, performance reports, and legislation. And that is compliance with legislation. Just to end off my presentation with a quote that is relevant to the accountability ecosystem, as well as the critical involvement of all the role players that are in this webinar today. What we're trying to achieve with the professionalization framework is that if everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. Thank you so much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ravad. You have indicated to us things that people tend to say in the public service are afraid of. That is, we are afraid of being audited, but we forget that the indicators that we have put to be audited on were designed by us. So it would be important that in the context of professionalization, that you're not only coming at the end, but also in the beginning to assist us with coming up with the proper indicators around professionalization issues so that they can be measurable and so that we can ultimately ensure that there's no poor quality performance reports that you have indicated in your presentation. And professionalization of the public procurement officials is important. I've seen comments that confirm that. I remember facilitating a session of local government officials. Actually, they were councillors. And I asked them as to why are they always fingered on corruption and when they do not actually participate in the bid committees. And one of them excitedly said to me, yes, indeed, we wonder too. But another in the group also said, but politicians like us, we also use public officials. So that is why it's important that public officials are professionalized to deal with procurement issues because they can also be used for corruption. And in this case, they are not only aiding and abetting it, but they are part of it. They are playing the role in it. So this is quite critical. Colleagues, we're going to move on now to the Q&A section. We'll be noting your comments, and Ms. Juanita Fennell will be on screen now to look at those questions and indicate as to how far they've been answered, or maybe pass some of them to who then be speaking about in the context of national treasury. But before that, Juanita Fennell on the
Thank you, Program Director. I think in terms of comments that we've received, I've tried to answer as much as I can. So some of these questions are fielded at National Treasury. Just one question, I think, let me start with AG because this was the most recent one. In terms of, and it's linked to the slide, it was touched on, Ms. Rawat, in terms of the insights on procurement and contract management. The question that was raised, and maybe just a quick answer, is around whether there was issues around project and contract management together with formalizing collaborative partnerships outside of contracts. It's a skill that seems like it's lacking amongst middle and senior management currently. And so the question is whether this was included based on some of the diagnostic challenges that you've experienced, and you touched on it in one of your slides. So maybe your comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Juanita, for that question. Yes, we do consider it. We consider all aspects of the supply chain management, including the project management issues. And we are looking also at the amount of spend that comes in on consultants in this area. So yes, we definitely do look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And then Mr. Vilakazi, can you, some of these questions, are you able to open your camera?
What's this? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Can you see my camera now?
No, we can't see you, but there's, I'm just checking with you. Yeah. So we can't see you as yet, but it's fine. Sorry?
It's loading. I don't know what was the issue here. Let me try again. Right. I should be available for now. But nonetheless, maybe let's proceed without maybe wasting much time. I've noted the other questions, though I haven't read them individually, but I guess on the part of the IFMS, I did respond to say that there was a plan that was implemented around 2021 by the National Treasury, where all the identified departments were approached in terms of workshopping and giving the status of the how far of the IFMS. What I understand basically also was that during that period, SITA was the leading project driver for this particular IFMS project, and then the National Treasury, DPSA, and Western Cape, also the Eastern Cape, were the sites identified as the kind of pilot sites to be piloted for the IFMS. However, the status quo now is that there were plans that were shared with the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, particularly on the stakeholder and client support, that once they are ready for implementing nationally, they will conduct a invitation to all the relevant departments in terms of the nomination. Remember, then also because it's a system, there needs to be role players within that system. So that's what I'm currently aware of in terms of the IFMS. Yeah. So I'll look into, maybe we can move to other questions with other role players within the platform or the webinar. I will look into the other SCM related comments, then I will provide my comments in that regard.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vilakasi. Over to you, Program Director.
Thank you, Ms. Fannin. Thank you to the responses that have been given so far. There's also a comment in the chat about whether we are recording this. Indeed, we are recording it, and NSG will keep the records, and I think it's likely to be shared upon request after the sessions. Even I think it relates also to a question around whether the presentations are available to be shared. We'll clarify that as far as whether we can load the presentations now or after the session, but I think it's possible after the session. Let us now move on, colleagues, to the reflection on this implementation by Mr. Nhlanhla Vilakazi. I hope he has sorted out his camera now, so it can be able to or the video can be able to appear. Mr. Vilakazi is from the Office of the Chief Procurement at the National Treasury. The Office of Chief Procurement Officer is tasked with modernizing the South African procurement system, including the professionalization of the supply chain management aspects. So he is the right person to be here to grapple with these issues and somehow to respond to some of the questions that we've been raising, which probably are related to supply chain aspect, including what is mentioned by Ms. Nyaka, that there's a need to establish a council related to supply chain. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much again, Program Director. I guess I'm now well clear and visible. I can even see myself here. Though I don't have a presentation per se, but in terms of guiding the way forward, I'm also, just to mention to the people who are actually joining the webinar, I'm also with Mr. Jeff Hlongwane. Jeff Hlongwane is an official responsible for capacity building at the National Treasury within the Office of the Accountant General. And then what I can mention that I've noted very much critical points that have been highlighted by the individual or different speakers, and starting from what Dr. Peterson has indicated. I mean, Dr. Maja just indicated that we're coming from what has been driven by the Zondo Commission's recommendation to professionalize the SCM, and then this is an urgent requirement that we are taking it very seriously as the National Treasury. And also building up to that discussion where Ms. Faith Nyaga indicated that we want to establish an element of something of a career choice, or an employer of choice as the SCM fraternity. And then we need to have people that are qualified and accredited. And I've noticed that even on the chart and the question, I mean, a Q&A box where people were also indicating that it is so much of an importance that we are professionalizing this particular SCM space. And then we have to then ensure that one of these, as highlighted by Ms. Nyaga, the objective of partnering with the different stakeholders is very much taken into a very broader aspect, and we are actually moving towards that goal. If maybe if I can share with the people that are joining us here, and I must also acknowledge their presence, and then I value their positive response in terms of those that have contacted me personally, so to ensure that they participate in this webinar. To say that we are actually moving towards that stage. Your provincial treasuries will play a very key role in terms of assisting us when we are now have a fully fledged plan in terms of the professionalization, particularly when we're talking the public procurement part. And also we have been moving quite very good on the area of ensuring that we have a very good relationship and establishing a collaborative engagements with higher learning institutions. Your UJ have been part of the engagements that we have been able to talk to. We are also have been engaging the University of Pretoria under this enterprise wing, which deals with short courses. And also on the other hand, we have been very much last month we have been engaging the Cape Peninsula University, where our vision and what we want to see to be achieved as the National Treasury, and the shortcomings that we have identified, and how we will want those shortcomings to be improved. And we are very much looking forward to ensuring that we as the National Treasury, we work closely with the XCM practitioners, all the organs of state, from the national departments, public entities, and as well as the provincial departments, including their provincial entities and the municipalities. And it is quite very key that we fast track this element of professionalizing the SCM space. And it is one of the agenda that has also been on the table of our currently CPO, Ms. Mendu Nswatlane, who's been like very vocal in that space. So we are very also appreciating the fact that partnering with National School of Government has led to this advocacy action plan, where now we are like sharing with you where we want to see ourselves. And furthermore, we also want to acknowledge the points shared by Dr. Naidu from DPME, and I think our practitioners have taken note of the role that they will be playing again in terms of their involvement in this professionalization of the SCM fraternity. And I don't know whether my colleague from National Treasury, Mr. Jeff, is also available. Over to you, sir. I think that's what I wanted to share with the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Vilakazi. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Jeff Tlongwane from the National Treasury. Am I audible, I believe? Or
yes, sir, you are. You may continue.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. My name is Jeff Tlongwane, as I've been introduced. I'm just going to add
to what my colleague Ntate Vilakazi has actually shared with you. But, let me firstly take, this opportunity to thank, the energy for having actually organized, this event, or platform, to share the issues of related to the professionalization of the public service. But we'll be zooming in, particularly the priority for us and as government. I think we can all actually agree more that it's related to supply chain management, which is a very contesting, area. The area where we actually experiencing challenges, poor service delivery in all spheres of government. Auditor General, hammering us in, year out regarding the wasteful, frustrated, as well as irregular, expenditure. Now, within the National Treasury, what we've done, and maybe before that, I think I'll echo, the very same sentiments by Dr. Maja, to say the talk show is over. I mean, we've all been talking about, the issue of professionalization. Now we need to talk about implementation, and I really welcome Faith, the professionalization actually framework and guidelines that you have provided us with, which indicate in terms of the milestones what needs to be done and achieved in a short space of time. But we do have actually capacity constraints, but as National Treasury, professionalization is a very expensive exercise. I think most can agree with me. I mean, with supply chain management, as opposed to other public finance management disciplines, we're looking at accounting, internal audit, risk management, where there are already no professional bodies in existence, like your CAs and so forth. But supply chain management, that plays a very integral role in the economy and service delivery. It is not actually yet professionalized. We have actually conducted some benchmark, studies through the Interim Council for Supply Chain Management in Africa, in terms of how far they are. Very few countries, have actually, achieved, the professionalization. Most of them actually in a process. But in particular within South Africa, I think there's so much that we have done, and we'll share with you just at a high level. I also didn't prepare a presentation, but it's only the reflection. Dr. Peterson, we're just actually sharing our reflection in relation to the presentations. Sis Faith indicated that, there's a need, for competency framework. We need to regulate, the minimum, competency requirements, job requirements. So what we did as National Treasury, 2014, as well as from the 2014, we developed, the capacity development strategy for public finance management. Amongst others, key to that was the issue that we hammered, how to professionalize the public finance management in all spheres of government. That was ensuring in that some of the things that come from the capacity development strategy was the competency framework for public finance management, all the discipline to say, if you are actually in the public finance, be that in the accounting within the office of the CFO, what are the skills requirements? What are the competences? What are the attributes that are required by one as a practitioner, be at the operational level, at the practitioner level, at the middle management level, or senior management level. Those were clearly articulated in the competency framework, together with the supporting technical competency dictionaries. So what we did with the work output, we then used the information to design and develop in collaboration with the DPSA, the development of the generic functional structure for the office of the CFO, where we say, what are the minimum functions that must be, performed, if you are a CFO, at the CFO level. And over and above that was then followed with the design and development of the standardized job, descriptions, for various financial management discipline, including supply chain management. And those JDs were job evaluated by the DPSA. But I think it's more than actually 8 years or 9 years. So much has happened. There is a need, Faith, yes, to review some of the JDs to align them also with the possible, professional, designation, which have been actually proposed by the interim council that we launched back in 2018. But also importantly that, dealing with the supply chain management, it plays a very critical role in any organization, whether at the municipal level, at an entity level, department, and so forth. It is actually responsible of ensuring that the department, execute its actually mandate effectively and effectively, because every policy that is there in the department, of course, will require, services. It will have to go through actually the procurement processes and supply chain management. And yet this is one of the functions that, is still regarded, not as a standalone discipline. I think part of the proposals that came from the interim council, including National Treasury, and engagement with other stakeholders to say, for us to begin talking about the professionalization of the supply chain management, we need to look at the location of the supply chain management as a function, as a discipline on its own. I think this function, it brings actually a lot of pressures, and challenges to most of the CFOs, because supply chain management is not just buying and so forth. You need to look at how do you align, the procurement plan, demand plan with the departmental, performance plan and so forth. Everything goes actually through procurement. And the issue of research, data analysis, commodity analysis, it requires, critical skills and competences to do that. So that's one thing that we're going to look at. But I'm glad that within the office of the CFO, they've already actually, through the bid proposals, to have supply chain management be an independent function on its own. When we look at the structure of the supply chain management, it's one of the things that we need to look at the institutional level. Whether, in professionalization, to have a procurement officer at the departmental level, a procurement officer at the municipality level, that's when we're beginning actually to professionalize and talking about professionalization. So those are some of the things that will be, and that Peterson, that will be in our implementation plan as National Treasury. We really well with us today as the National Treasury to say, guys, these are the milestones, and we have a time frames. I think it's something that we as National Treasury, even within the Office of the Accountant General in the capacity building unit, that the discussion that we had with Mr. Mashamba, the Chief Director, he said, Jeff, we need actually to prioritize the professionalization of supply chain management. And even if it means that you leave everything else, you focus on this, I think we'll be doing justice to the country at large, but also supporting the DPSA together with the NSU, who's actually spearheading, the professionalization. So we really appreciate this. So what we have done up to so far, also in the education fraternity with regard to the qualifications, we did design in 2018 the SCM master curriculum, and some of the colleagues who may be here from provincial treasuries participated in the design and development of the master curriculum for SCM learning program, where it articulates, and try to align the proposed qualifications with the SAQA and the CHE qualifications in terms of our qualifications framework for NQF level 5, 6, 7, and 8, including the development of the occupational qualifications with the QCTO, So we will actually plan and also continue to ensure that the content and the qualifications that are registered and up to, bachelor's, degree level, honors level in procurement and supply chain management. That is part of the plan. But these are the things that have been done. But what we need to do, and I will really appreciate and welcome this, a platform that as National Treasury, as the implementer, we need to actually have a coherent approach, have a plan, and looking at what, as it's been advised, earlier by Dr. I don't see him here, one of the doctors, I think from the DPME, that when you look at the short term and the medium to long term, what are the things that need to be done? What are the immediate actually priorities? So what we've proposed and what we've done with the interim council, and together with the support of the Transport Education Training Authority, TETA, has been very much actually supportive in the design and implementation of some of the qualifications. I think for your noting, colleagues, through your chairpersons, that to date we have piloted, the SCM, piloted the delivery of the SCM certificate at NQF level 5 to about 260, SCM practitioners in the municipalities, in the various provinces, about 6 provinces that benefited, and some have graduated recently. On Tuesday, I was in the Free State with the provincial treasury, the MEC of finance as well, where about 53 graduate employed officials were graduating on this qualification. And the commitment, the support was to say we need to move to the next level, NQF level 6, NQF level 7, and those are the contributions towards the professionalization. I mean, there's evidence within the SCM baseline that was conducted between 2014 and 2017 that demonstrated and showed that yes, officials, some of the officials who are working supply chain management don't have formal qualifications or relevant qualifications. Some may have qualifications but may not be related to supply chain management. So with the support of TETA, and also I think we'll have to encourage other SETAs as well. You're like your P-SETA, the LG SETA, and through the National Skills Fund, let's come up with a program to say by 2030, in line with the NDP, in the professionalizing, the public sector, that by 2030, our vision should be that everyone within the supply chain management, environment must have at least a bare minimum qualifications by the time. So I think that's what also the message from the MEC in the Northwest, also in the Free State, to say, look, we are gone are those days whereby everyone who's not actually fit for purpose in an organization will then be thrown, in supply chain management, as it used to be. That if your Jeff was not fit for purpose in any unit, will then be thrown under logistics because it was regarded as what? As a by the way function. But now supply chain management, through their forms, it is regarded as one of the strategic, key functions in any organization. So with the interim council, we have made submission to the UNDP. And I think UNDP, in our engagement with them, they also acknowledge to say we'll also, inform the National Treasury, the NSG Treasury, that we are working with you. We want to support you in taking the work of the interim council. The interim council, when it was launched, it was funded by the EU, followed by the GIZ, where up to date the council has developed, the competency framework and standard for supply chain management as a discipline, not only for the public sector, for the entire industry, where we're looking at public and the private sector, to regulate and formalize, the professionalization of supply chain management in all the sectors. So that proposal is still with the NDP, and it will form part of the implementation plan. So practically, what has to be done from our side, we have drafted, already last year drafted and consulted with our provincial treasuries the terms of reference in relation to the professionalization, to say, let's work together as professional, as the treasuries, but also taking into consideration who will be the key, stakeholders that can assist us in the professionalization of supply chain management. Yourselves were mentioned, CHEs, QCTO, TITA, and other sitters, to say, to everyone that can contribute and play a role in the professionalization of supply chain. So we will welcome and take the framework as the guidance, what they've been given now, to incorporate that in our implementation plan. So colleagues that are here from the treasuries will have engagement with them, including the local government sector, that is your SALGA, as well as your DECO, that is the cooperative governance, for local government. I think basically that's where we are looking at. And those are the directions. Thank you very much. We'll make sure, Sis Faith, and through Chairperson and others, that the Office of the Accountant General and the OCPO, we put together, an implementation plan regarding the priorities for this year and the next coming 2 to 3 years. And that's my submission. And but thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vilakazi and Mr. Hlongwane, for this comprehensive reflection. I can't believe that you say you did not write anything down. So it's clearly we are in the safe hands of people who know what they're talking about and who feel what they're talking about. Thanks a lot for that. It was quite clear. There's a question that I would like to read out to you because I think it came while you were presenting, from Mr. Raymond Naidu. It says, recognizing that within the SCM space, there are a number of prescripts notes that exist, and this can also be a contributor to misinterpretation, giving rise to SCM non-compliances. I would like National Treasury to advise on the status of the procurement bill, whose original intent was to be the single piece of SCM legislation. Could you please respond to that aspect?
Thank you very much, Program Director. From the point of, let me just maybe just to be at least to get a very proper follow of the plan and then the question answering in a much more structured way. I'll start from the question from Komoto Shadi. The issue she spoke about, the remuneration could be looked at with the consultation of the DPSA. That's my response in terms of that. The issue of remuneration and how you structure the payment of a particular position, it's an undertaking that needs to be taken with the consultation of the DPSA. However, we are very much appreciating the fact that he has indicated or he has actually highlighted that particular aspect in terms of the salary level that are maybe inconsistent and within the SCM fraternity. And then also we have taken note of the proposal of a SITA model. I think with this particular webinar, and as well as we have indicated that we are embracing the advocacy in this regard, which we have already started. We are actually taking note of such proposals in terms of what the participants think will be a proposal that government should be looking at. And then the other comments have also been noted in that regard in your question. And then moving furthermore, Ruben has also highlighted, what I can respond is that there is a plan that OCPO has been working on in terms of the Zondo recommendations. If they will be following the discussion that have been happening with the formation called SUF. SUF is a state-owned enterprise forum that is representing mainly the state-owned entities, and then that body has been engaging quite intensively with the National Treasury, and some of the issues that have been highlighted from the Zondo Commission point of view have been put onto an action plan. We will on at the right time. At that point, it was during the acting of Mr. Fani, who was like acting at that time of the, now the current position has been filled by Ms. Mendu Twatlan. So we are taking forward all the issues that have been in the pipeline, and we've been working on that one. And then we embrace also and acknowledge that yes, vetting maybe might not be as intensive as people will have wanted to see it, but it is actually, there is something being done in terms of intensifying the vetting of SCM officials, and maybe the missing link is also on the issue of your further expanding the scope into and ensuring that there is a good comparison in terms of the level of salary that each practitioner is receiving and their level of their life in general, and that is one of the areas that needs to be looked at. But I know for a fact that DPSA as well is also driving that particular area in terms of ensuring that the lifestyle audit is one of the key areas that will be looked into. Hence, this discussion on the professionalization will look into all these aspects. And then furthermore, moving to Raymond's and Naidu's comment, the status quo of the public procurement bill is that my understanding was that it's still in the process of being tabled to Parliament. Yes, we know there has been delays based on what the Minister of Finance has announced and the current status quo where we are, but there are some background actions that are being put in terms of fast-tracking the approval of the public procurement bill. And much of the issues that are emanating from these discussions, they will be factored into and they will be forming part of the reforms that SCM will be moving into. And at the end of the day, we might see some few changes. Coupling to that, also Anele Killian, the other comment of saying Treasury is very much on a prescriptive mode than not moving in an innovative way and looking at the trends that are happening. I guess the consultation that has also happened or that have been undertaken in terms of the public procurement bill and the inputs that we have received thus far have also catered for those initiatives in terms of the futuristics looking forward of the public procurement fraternity, and then also to be benchmarking with the entire world as to how public procurement is being undertaken. And you will also acknowledge and agree with me that it is a very daunting exercise and at some point very frustrating, where you have to come with a piece of legislation that talks to the entire country, not necessarily looking to what one particular area of organ of state in terms of either a municipality space or the SOE, state-owned enterprises or national department. And that has been one of the other challenging areas where we needed to make sure that once this public procurement bill is adopted and approved and being implemented, it talks to everybody and not just one aspect of the organ of state. And you will acknowledge that. And furthermore, Fundiswa Kajana, you will agree with me that Ms. Nyaga has also touched on the issue of appointment for senior managers, where you are saying we need to look into the appointment of chief procurement officers. Yes, the framework for professionalization also looks into that space as well to ensure that there is uniformity and standardization across the board, particularly when it comes to public procurement. And then Tebogo's comment is also saying DPSA is also a stakeholder to guide the structural formation and organization of every organ of state, including the element of the CFOs being the responsible leaders in the SCM or the oversight officer in terms of ensuring that there's an establishment of an SCM area within their organization. So this is a discussion that has been ongoing for some time, and it is included as well in that envisaged professionalization to ensure that we are viewing SCM or public procurement as a standalone or area of expect that is not necessarily linked to the CFO's office, and they are viewed at that strategic point of view. I think, yeah, I've covered that. And Anele, your comment is also, there is an ongoing exercise in that regard in terms of what you have actually posed as a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the responses. There are two questions about professional bodies, which I think Ms. Nyaga can respond to, and any other panelists who have knowledge on that. One is whether, as to who will pay for professional bodies membership. In other words, is it public officials themselves, or is the institutions that are paying on their behalf? The second one is, do you believe that professional bodies that are mainly aimed at the private sector will adapt their CPD programs to cater for the needs of the public sector? Those are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start with the one for the payment of fees. I think it's an interesting one because every meeting you'll find that normally the simple answer would be you have your says where educators who earn not so much are able to pay for themselves. So we're going to look at the practice. What is currently happening with the statutory professional bodies is that individuals, members are paying for the fees. So even with this one where the framework is calling for registration with professional bodies, it means individual members are going to pay for their fees. And there was a question where they said the fees are very high. I think that in terms of my understanding in my previous work, because I worked with professional bodies, is that the fees are linked to a designation in terms of, so if it's a designation at the low level, it's linked to also your salary. I think they take cognizance of saying that, how will you pay? So a person who gets registered with a professional registration as an engineer with EXA will pay more than a person who pays SAYS as an educator. So, and in terms of the arrangements that would be done, I think we wouldn't let professional bodies to, what can I say, to charge abnormal fees for public servants because we know how our salary levels are. There will be MOAs and everything that will be signed, and it will address all the things. And it moves and touch to the second question to say, will professional bodies align their CPD training to what we want in the public sector? I think in the framework, we have indicated a number of issues that we need to make sure that they comply. Remember, as the public sector, we've got needs, so they must meet our needs. A professional body that cannot adapt or meet our needs or demonstrate that they'll be able to deliver a service, we can't sign MOUs and whatever and force public servants to join them if the services that they're going to render are not going to be useful. And I think in terms of the CPDs and whatever, the NSG is taking a lead on that. We do have a chief directorate that is responsible for ensuring that the training programs that they're going to offer are going to be relevant to the needs of the public sector. I think my colleague Louise is working on that. So that is going to be taken care of. We won't sign any, MOA or MOU with any professional body if we know that their training is not aligned to the public sector. And I think also in Jeff's professional bodies also work with your with your Council on Higher Education for setting standards for qualifications. And I think in the SCM, there's an outcry that the qualifications that we have now are not doing what they're supposed to do. So Treasury will lead there to ensure that the current qualifications are being reviewed, and we'll work with them in our advocacy program, because there's a section where we'll be meeting higher education institutions. So those are things that we need to present to them to say what are the gaps. And I think also at the NSG, we already have partnerships with them and so forth. And also our training programs, CPDs, we have short courses and so forth. We are going to make sure that they address the problems and working in collaboration with the various departments to make sure that our training programs as the NSG also address the gaps that have been identified. And also to come to that Treasury, the NSG is currently working with the Council, with the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations to accredit some qualifications and programs for us. So these are some of the discussions that we might have outside this meeting to see how the NSG can support Treasury to make sure that the SCM officials are properly qualified and come up with qualifications. And my colleagues from curriculum are here to make sure that we bridge that gap in the public sector, because starting from next year, the NSG will be delivering full qualifications. And I think our business development and marketing department are going to advertise as soon as we are accredited. So we are also contributing in the area where there are skills gaps in terms of our short learning programs and also full qualifications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. While Mr. Vilakazi or Mr. Hlongwane respond to a question posted there by Paupalelo Mulelekwa, I would also like to announce that Ms. Kulsam Field is in a good mood, because she has indicated that she can allow few people or one or three questions, which are burning questions that can also be raised verbally. So she will note your raised hand and allow you after the response to the question from Paupalelo Mulelekwa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Program Director. Let me, Mr. Hlongwane, I will just take the question from, I think it's a follow-up one from Mr. Moromane, and then you will take the one from Paupalelo Mulelekwa, I think is in the Northern Cape. Ms. Moromane, what I can say is that out of my head, I know, because we're talking, this is just one of the information sharing sessions. Say, SCM has been viewed as one of the most risky areas, priority number one or suspect number one area in terms of this pandemic that we are facing of corruption in the public sector. And then that is one of the main reasons why we have SCM single out as the area where vetting has to be intensified and done. However, I think through discussions such as this one, there has been an acknowledgement as well from the DPSA. Remember, this responsibility of vetting and lifestyle audit is residing with the DPSA. So I think there is some form of discussion happening, or that is underway within the DPSA, to actually find a mechanism of vetting whoever might be viewed to be in a very compromising area or where public funds are involved. I think that will be my answer to that. And then over to you, Mhlonishwa Hlongwane. Thank you.
Thank you, Ntate Vilakazi. Regarding the question of Ntate,
You muted, Mhlonishwa.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible now? Thank you. Ntate Mulelekwa, look, with regard to the professionalization or development of the accounting officers, as opposed to the what you call the practitioners and managers within the SCM, the accounting officer is responsible, for the overall, organization in terms of actually the making sure that they implements according to its mandate. Now, or the professionalization side will professionalize the SCM. Hence, we say where our proposal is to have in each department, have the SCM function outside the office of the CFO, where we can appoint, the chief procurement officer for the municipalities or a department. The chief procurement officer will then be reporting directly to the accounting officer. However, you're quite right to a certain degree that there is a need to empower accounting officers in understanding, clear roles and responsibilities when coming to supply chain management or public finance management in general. As the National Treasury, we did actually piloted a program that we call it the SCM, executive for executive management. That was SCM Executive Development Program that was meant for the CFOs, HODs, mayors, and the councillors now with the support of the New Zealand. We're also taking care of our executives and leadership in the regard. So when we say let's do it actually on the bottom side, we must also do on top as well. So that is actually an integrated approach. But we take this actually as a note as well, as a recommendation to say, while considering the SCM professionalization, let's also look at our principles as well. And it's something that we're going to do. We have done that before. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any burning verbal questions?
We don't have any hands, Dr. Peterson.
All right.
Oh,
thanks.
one just appeared. Sorry, one just appeared.
All right. That could indicate that those who had, because there was a person who had a hand earlier, may be answered after this comprehensive response that we've been receiving so far.
Good morning, colleagues. It's Madira Dawadislam. I've got a question on the Q&As and it's not yet responded. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Colleagues, we come into the end of our program, and it's important though to highlight the aspects that arose from this session. The speakers, please stay on because we would like to have a selfie. A selfie that is going to be where you can put on your cameras and we take a picture in the end. But quickly, let's just note the important aspects that came out of this. And there's nothing else but the importance of implementation. So clearly, you will know that today we have actually focused on the departments that play a regulatory role. Your auditors, your treasury people, policy, monitoring and evaluation, and DPSA. So all these departments, that they provide norms and standards, they manage the policies as to how they are implemented, but they're also part of the development of those policies. So your role on professionalization is highly critical, and it has been shown by the number of people showing interest with their questions. So, and we know that it's critical because the public sector is safer when it is drawn or based on policies. When we noted the developments at the State Capital Commission, that is by Zondo Commission, and the SCD menu commissions, we remember that the commissioners did not want to take any excuse from public officials who say, the minister made me do it, or the premier made me do it. It was important that you should rely on your policy, what the policy says, what were you supposed to do as an official. As a result, no one can have an excuse about being forced to do something when they know what they should do and they don't do it. Then they should be accountable for that. Hence, the language of consequence management comes into play also. Because this thing of blaming some people having made you do something, that shows lack of knowledge or willful intention to do the wrong things also. It reminds us also of the case of the late Hansi Cronje, who played cricket, and who, when he was in the commission about the corruption in cricket, he said that the devil made him do it. So we can't have excuses about the devil making us do things here. This knowledge and intention, as indicated by Treasury, that they'll put things in place and implement the processes are all important to ensure that we know what we are doing and why we are doing what we are doing. So let us now have, and let me thank you very much for attending. All the participants, you are just because of you that we could be able to be here. All the panelists, all the people who presented, thank you very much for honoring the occasion. Treasury, thanks a lot to Mr. Fongwane as well as Mr. Vilakazi for giving us such detailed information around Treasury, Ms. Ravat from Auditor General, and Mr. As well as our own Dr. Maja and Ms. Faith Nyaga. Thanks a lot for for honoring this occasion and giving us such valuable information. So, Kulsam, I hope you'll give us indication whether we can be ready for the selfie.
Just wait, hang on. I see Dr. Naidu has joined us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Program Director. Sorted.
Thanks a lot. Yes, thanks a lot to Dr. Naidu. Actually, Dr. Naidu was transferred from this department. So we need to see how much he can be brought back to the NSG. Thanks a lot. Thanks for attending. Enjoy your day.